Have you ever found that the more clearly you see the world, the more distant you feel from it? That deeper understanding, instead of bringing connection, seems to stretch a quiet space between you and everyone else. This isn't simply your imagination. Across time, society has instinctively recoiled from those who think too deeply, not because they are mistaken, but because they pierce through illusions most would rather not see shattered. From Socrates to Tesla, history is marked by the silence imposed on the minds that saw too much, too clearly, too early. It isn't intellect itself that unsettles people, it's what that intellect reveals. A sharp mind does not simply propose new concepts. It acts as a mirror, involuntarily reflecting back the limitations, biases, and contradictions in those around it. And people do not easily forgive a mirror that shows them what they've spent their lives trying to avoid. The discomfort arises not from overt arrogance, but from the subtle threat of insight, a word unspoken, a truth implied, that stirs something uneasy in others. It's not the deep thinker's fault. Their very presence can be disruptive, even if they never utter a word. Unlike physical strength or wealth, traits that others may admire or envy without personal threat, intellectual superiority strikes deeper. Intelligence touches something sacred, our inner narratives. People define themselves by their ideas, beliefs, and perceived understanding of the world. When someone enters the room who questions what others have long accepted, it doesn't feel like a challenge to an idea. It feels like a challenge to identity itself. That's why people turn away. Not because they've judged the idea and found it flawed, but because facing it requires confronting their own limitations. And so the deep thinker walks a lonely road, not out of arrogance, but because few are willing to walk beside them. History consistently shows how societies exile, mock, or marginalize those who think beyond the collective comfort zone. The insights of such individuals don't merely disrupt traditions, they unsettle egos. And the human ego, threatened, will defend itself with everything it has. Think of your own experiences. Have you ever tried to share a complex idea in a casual setting, only to be met with awkward silence or a quick change of topic? Have you noticed how most conversations seem designed to circle safely around the same few themes, work, weather, entertainment, never straying too far beneath the surface? This isn't accidental. It's a kind of unspoken group defense mechanism. When a deep thinker begins to unravel familiar thought patterns, the surrounding minds instinctively tighten. Instead of curiosity, you meet resistance. Instead of dialogue, dismissal. This is why so many intellectuals, visionaries, and philosophers often find themselves isolated. It is not because they are antisocial or unwilling to connect, but because their very nature invites friction. Their ideas disrupt the mental equilibrium of those who find comfort in simple answers. Ironically, in most social settings, confidence is valued far more than complexity. People naturally gravitate toward those who express certainty, even if that certainty rests on shallow foundations. As a result, charismatic but simplistic voices rise quickly, while more nuanced, thoughtful voices struggle for air. We see this paradox play out everywhere. Popular leaders, viral personalities, and motivational speakers gain massive followings, not by saying what is true, but by saying what is palatable. In contrast, those who provoke critical thought are often ignored, if not outright rejected. This doesn't mean that deep thinkers are wrong. It means they are difficult. And in a world addicted to convenience and ease, difficulty is often equated with negativity. The discomfort provoked by intellectual depth isn't just social, it's biological. Neuroscience has begun to uncover how the human brain reacts when faced with perceived intellectual threats. Studies show that when someone feels intellectually inferior, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, activates as if confronted by a physical threat. In essence, intelligence can trigger a primal survival response. But why? Why would the presence of a sharp mind activate the same neural circuits as danger? The answer lies in the structure of our evolutionary past. For most of human history, survival depended not on being the smartest individual, but on being accepted by the tribe. Belonging was safety. Rejection meant exposure, vulnerability, death. As a result, our brains evolved to prioritize social harmony over intellectual exploration. The group came first. Dissent, even if rational, risked destabilizing the tribe. And so, conformity became an evolutionary advantage. Enter the deep thinker, someone who questions norms, challenges consensus, and exposes contradictions. Their very existence disrupts the social fabric. In group settings, this disruption is magnified. A 2021 Stanford study found that people feel less threatened by intellectuals in one-on-one interactions, but experience a sharp spike in discomfort in group environments. This is because in groups, status matters. When someone outshines the group intellectually, the instinctive response is not admiration, it's protection of social standing. Others may subtly exclude, undermine, or ignore the thinker to restore equilibrium. This explains why deep thinkers often find more meaningful connections in private, intimate settings, but struggle in larger gatherings. The issue isn't their communication. It's that their thoughts by nature disrupt the unspoken balance that group dynamics depend on. Psychologists have identified several cognitive biases that make this resistance even more entrenched. Take the Dunning-Kruger effect, where those with less ability overestimate their competence while the highly capable underestimate theirs. This leads to tension. The least informed are often the most confident, while the most informed approach ideas with humility and uncertainty. And so, those who know little often reject those who know more, not because they have better arguments, but because they are louder and more certain. Then there's the status quo bias, the mental preference for familiar beliefs over uncomfortable truths. Deep thinkers inevitably introduce discomfort. They bring ideas that require effort to understand, beliefs that conflict with the status quo, and questions that expose inconsistencies. For most people, this feels threatening. Even worse is the backfire effect. When confronted with evidence that contradicts their beliefs, people don't reconsider. They double down. They entrench themselves further in what they already believe, resenting the person who disrupted their peace of mind. For the deep thinker, this is the most frustrating outcome. Rather than fostering discussion, they inadvertently provoke defensiveness. In today's world, these dynamics are amplified by the digital age. Social media thrives not on nuance but on simplicity. Algorithms reward engagement, and nothing engages like outrage, humor, or affirmation. As a result, emotionally charged or superficial content spreads rapidly, while thoughtful, layered discourse is left behind. Intellectuals struggle to condense their insights into bite-sized clips. Their ideas are too complex for the viral formula. Meanwhile, those who oversimplify, entertain, or provoke with reckless certainty dominate the space. This environment doesn't just exclude deep thinkers, it penalizes them. The very architecture of digital communication, designed for speed, emotion, and virality, is incompatible with the way deep minds operate. The result is a cultural tilt toward entertainment over enlightenment. Intelligence, instead of being valued, becomes inconvenient. So what are deep thinkers to do in a society that seems built to reject them? The answer isn't retreat but understanding. It is crucial for those who see more deeply to understand the psychological, biological, and cultural forces working against them, not to be discouraged, but to navigate wisely. Comfort, not truth, is the dominant currency in modern social interaction. People are drawn to what soothes, not what challenges. Arthur Schopenhauer, the bleakly brilliant philosopher, recognized this long ago. He did not view intelligence as a gift to be celebrated, but as a burden to be endured. The sharper your perception, the harder it becomes to relate to a world that thrives on illusion. According to Schopenhauer, most people are driven by what he called the will to live, a blind instinct to pursue pleasure, safety, and survival. But deep thinkers often operate differently. They possess what he described as the will to truth, an unyielding desire to understand reality, even when that reality is painful. They are not content with distraction. They are not comforted by small talk. They crave meaning, and that craving alienates them from a society built on avoidance. Where most find joy in entertainment, social games, and routine pleasures, the deep thinker sees only surface. They notice the falseness in social rituals, the performative nature of politeness, and the hidden motives behind daily interactions. They do not despise these things. They simply struggle to immerse themselves in them without feeling disconnected. It's not arrogance, it's an inability to pretend. The further a person sees, the harder it becomes to stay blind. Schopenhauer believed that most of what people desire, wealth, status, even relationships, is built on illusions. To want something, he argued, is to be ruled by a lack. And the more one understands this, the more futile these pursuits begin to feel. For deep thinkers, this leads to detachment. Not because they don't care, but because they see through too much. They are not indifferent, they are disillusioned. And disillusionment, though rooted in clarity, is often mistaken for coldness. To see clearly is to carry a weight. The more deeply one understands, the more invisible one becomes to a society that values familiarity over truth. But while clarity may isolate, it also frees. Schopenhauer, for all his cynicism, did not see solitude as punishment. He believed that isolation was the natural refuge of those who think beyond the surface. Solitude allows deep thinkers to engage with ideas unfiltered by social pretense. It offers the rare silence where thought can stretch without being smothered by misunderstanding. Schopenhauer advised that intellectuals not waste their time seeking validation from a society unprepared for their depth. Instead, he urged them to find their nourishment in literature, philosophy, and quiet observation. The goal is not to convince everyone but to stay true to insight. He warned against offering profound truths to minds not ready to receive them. When ideas are shared too soon, they are not only rejected, they are weaponized against their originator. Modern society mirrors this ancient truth. Deep thinkers are often advised to dumb it down or lighten up, not out of malice, but because the average social setting is not structured to accommodate complexity. This is not a failure of the thinker. It is a reflection of how the world prioritizes emotional comfort over intellectual confrontation. The world doesn't hate truth. It just prefers that truth arrive after it's been softened, simplified, and made palatable. This pattern plays out across history. The great minds, those who introduced seismic shifts in human understanding, were rarely celebrated in their lifetimes. Socrates was sentenced to death not for any crime, but for asking questions people weren't ready to answer. His execution wasn't about law, it was about preserving a fragile social order. Galileo was condemned for proving truths that contradicted the ruling dogma. His science threatened the foundation of authority, so his silence was demanded in return for his life. Nietzsche's insights into morality, power, and the illusions of tradition were considered dangerous in his day, and he died misunderstood. Tesla, perhaps one of the greatest visionaries of all time, died poor and alone, his ideas too ahead of their era, his intentions too pure for a world driven by profit. The rejection of deep thinkers is not personal, it is structural. Societies are designed not to nurture insight but to preserve equilibrium. Progress is accepted only in hindsight, once it has been stripped of its original threat. That's why many intellectuals are ridiculed while alive and revered only after their ideas have been diluted for public consumption. Society doesn't fear intelligence, it fears what intelligence disrupts. But what can a deep thinker do in such a world? To retreat entirely is to abandon influence. To constantly conform is to betray truth. The path lies in selective expression. Not every space deserves your full depth. Not every conversation needs your full insight. Like an artist who paints in shadows, the deep thinker must learn when to speak, when to remain silent, and when to translate truth into a language others can understand. This doesn't mean diluting your mind, it means learning to meet people where they are. The goal is not to impress but to connect. Albert Einstein once said, "If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough." Simplicity, when born of understanding, is not compromise, it is clarity refined. But to speak simply is not to think simply. It is to translate complexity into accessibility. It is to remove ego from explanation. Many deep thinkers make the mistake of speaking for themselves instead of for their audience. When the ego drives expression, ideas become walls. When compassion drives it, ideas become bridges. And yet there will still be rejection. Even the most careful, humble, and empathetic thinker cannot bypass the primal instincts of those who are not ready. This is not your fault. The human brain, as psychology shows, is wired for cognitive ease. It clings to the familiar, the predictable, the emotionally safe. New ideas are automatically filtered through layers of bias, fear, and ego defense. System justification is one of the mind's most powerful mechanisms. It compels people to defend the systems that harm them simply because those systems are familiar. Groupthink pushes individuals to align with the majority to avoid social exile. The result is a culture where truth is often unwelcome, especially when it threatens the illusions that hold society together. In this environment, deep thinkers must develop emotional resilience, not the kind that hardens into bitterness, but the kind that softens into wisdom. Understand that misunderstanding is not always rejection. Sometimes it is fear, masked as dismissal. Sometimes it is confusion, masked as apathy. Often it is projection, your depth stirring an unconscious awareness in others of their own stagnation. You will not be understood by everyone. That's not your burden to carry. Your responsibility is to protect your clarity, not to force others to accept it. Thinkers must learn to live with the gap between what they see and what others are willing to see. It is in this gap that loneliness is born, but also in this gap that originality resides. True connection for the deep thinker is not found in the many but in the rare. It is not about reaching millions. It is about finding those few who are ready to meet you at your level. These are the conversations that will sustain you. These are the minds that will understand without explanation. They may be few, but they are enough. And until they are found, there is always the solace of ideas themselves. Books, art, music, and the vast landscape of human thought across history, all whispering to the isolated mind, you are not alone. Every page written by a misunderstood genius is a hand extended across time. Every poem, every theory, every unappreciated masterpiece is proof that your mind is part of something larger, something eternal. Even in modern times, deep thinkers face the same barriers. Education systems often praise conformity over creativity. Schools reward memorization, not inquiry. The student who questions the premise is marked as disruptive, not insightful. Workplaces promote those who play the political game, not necessarily those who think most clearly. Innovation is often tolerated only when it serves profit. And politics, the leaders who speak hard truths often lose to those who offer easy answers. Substance rarely wins over spectacle. This is why the greatest minds often walk outside the mainstream. They don't fit because they are not meant to. Their ideas bend reality. Their vision challenges comfort. Their insights invite others to step outside of habit and into self-awareness. And that is a frightening step for many. Yet in time, it is these minds that shape the future. Not the loudest voices, but the truest. Not the most liked, but the most lasting. Truth, by its nature, requires time to ripen. It often arrives too soon for the world to handle. But it does not fade. It waits. And when the world catches up, what was once dismissed becomes doctrine. The deep thinker must understand this rhythm. You are not here to be accepted by everyone. You are here to see clearly, to speak wisely, and to plant seeds that may not blossom in your lifetime. Socrates did not see the impact of his teachings. Tesla did not witness the technology he foresaw. Turing did not live to see the world built on his code. They each played their part in silence, knowing, or perhaps never knowing, that time would justify their vision. So if you've ever felt like an outsider, like your thoughts stretch farther than the conversations around you, know that you are part of a long, noble tradition. You are not strange, you are early. You are not arrogant, you are attuned. Your mind is not a burden, it is a light. And while that light may be too bright for some, it will be a beacon for others. Protect your light. Don't extinguish it for comfort. Don't shrink it to fit in. Let it burn quietly if it must, but let it burn. The world may not understand it today, but it needs it more than ever. Because while comfort sustains the present, it is only truth that builds the future. You were not made to echo, you were made to illuminate. And in the end, those who fear deep thinkers today will one day teach their children about them. They will quote their words, study their ideas, and admire the courage they once condemned. Because truth, once feared, becomes wisdom once time has dulled the sting of its arrival. So keep thinking, keep questioning, keep observing. Let your thoughts stretch, even if the world shrinks around them. You may be alone in your understanding, but you are not alone in your legacy. For every Socrates silenced, a Plato is born to carry the flame. For every Tesla ignored, a generation rises built on his dreams. If society does not welcome you, it is because you are not here to fit into it. You are here to help it grow beyond what it now is. That path is not easy, but it is necessary, and you are not alone.